Imagine sitting in a courtroom, hidden in the back row under a hoodie, while your own mother stands at the front, crying crocodile tears and telling a judge that you've been dead for 2 years. Now imagine the look on her face when you stand up and say, "Actually, Your Honor, I'm right here." This isn't a movie. This was my Tuesday. To understand how I ended up legally deceased while perfectly healthy, we have to go back 3 years. I'm a software engineer, and I've always been the black sheep of the family, mostly because I worked hard, moved across the country, and stopped being the ATM for my older sister, Sarah, and my parents. When I landed a senior role in Singapore, I decided to go low contact. I told them I was going away for a while, blocked their numbers when the begging for money didn't stop, and just lived my life. I bought a beautiful 3-bedroom house in my hometown as an investment property, which I rented out. My parents knew about the house, and they hated that I wouldn't let them live in it rent-free. Apparently, while I was building a life in Asia, they were building a conspiracy. About 6 months ago, I started getting weird notifications. My credit cards were being declined. My bank accounts were frozen. When I finally got through to a human at the bank, they told me something that chilled my blood. "Sir, our records indicate this account holder is deceased." I flew back to the States immediately. I found out that my mother and sister had filed a petition for a presumption of death. They told the court I had disappeared on a solo hiking trip in a remote part of Southeast Asia and hadn't been heard from in years. They forged emails, fabricated witness statements from friends I hadn't seen in a decade, and even produced a fake memorial program. Why? Because as their legal heirs, they wanted to liquidate my investment property and drain my retirement accounts, which totaled nearly 7 figures. They had a hearing scheduled to finalize the transfer of the deed. They thought they were in the clear. They thought I was thousands of miles away, oblivious. I didn't call them. I didn't text them. I hired the meanest estate litigator in the state, and we planned our entrance. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse. I saw my sister wearing a black dress, looking like she was ready for a gala rather than a funeral. My mom was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Their lawyer was mid-sentence saying, "Your Honor, it has been a tragic period for the family, but the absence of any contact or activity proves that the deceased is no longer with us." My lawyer stood up and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce a key piece of evidence that contradicts the petitioner's claim." The judge looked annoyed. And what would that be? I stood up, pulled back my hood, and walked toward the bench. I said, "The evidence is me, Your Honor. I'm the deceased son, and I'd like to know why my mother is trying to bury me alive." The silence in that room was deafening. I watched the color drain from my mother's face. She didn't look happy to see me. She didn't look relieved that her son was alive. She looked terrified. My sister actually screamed. It wasn't a "thank God you're okay" scream. It was the sound of a woman watching $1 million payday evaporate in real time. The judge was absolutely livid. He called a recess and took the lawyers into his chambers. My mother tried to run over to me crying, saying they only did it because they thought I was in danger and they wanted to protect my assets. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You didn't want to protect me. You wanted to sell my house. See you in the deposition." By the end of the week, the presumption of death was vacated, but we weren't done. My lawyer filed for fraud, and I'm currently working with the DA to press charges for perjury and identity theft. I've put a restraining order on both of them, and I'm selling the house anyway, just so they can watch someone else move in. They tried to kill me off on paper to line their pockets. Now they're finding out that I'm much more dangerous alive. The moral of the story? Be careful who you share your success with, because even blood will turn cold for the right price. What would you do if your family tried to erase you? Let me know in the comments.